Hello, everyone. It is April 13th. We are your hosts, Doc J and JD, and you are listening to the Full Court Press, your all-in-one NBA podcast. Welcome back. Thank you so much for coming to our channel. Make sure you take a minute to like and subscribe for all the NBA content you guys can handle. A lot happened this week, JD, and one of the first things I really want to talk about is the Rudy Gobert incident that happened on live television. He and Kyle Anderson really got into it. And I think one of the first things we need to talk about is who's really at fault here.
Oh, man. Well, Doc, I got to say that I think there's probably a lot that went behind the scenes. I know you were kind of telling me that Kyle and him were kind of getting into it early. Kyle was saying some certain stuff. Do you want to talk a little bit about that?
Absolutely. So, like you said, I wanted to do some digging to really try to understand full circle kind of what we were looking at. So, per Adrian Wojnarowski, he actually stated that Kyle Anderson repeatedly called Rudy Gobert the B word, which is what prompted Rudy to throw that kind of like shoulder punch that he threw. Something else that I thought was interesting was there was a released sound clip by someone in the Timberwolves front office, or who works for their company, who had a sound bite that it was Kyle Anderson talking in the locker room. And he was saying, y'all kisses too much. This is some effing BS. You guys have an effing decision to make this summer. I'm telling you that. What the F are we doing? And like that. So that was leaked as well. And so first, I would say that I do believe that both parties are at fault here. I was kind of annoyed. Like, I think with the punch, we'll start there. Like, with it happening in such a public place and on national television, you have to suspend Rudy. You had to do that. And it honestly cost them the game against the Lakers too, in my opinion. But if I was the front office, I definitely would be sitting down with Kyle Anderson as well, and probably suspending him too. Because that kind of toxic leadership just really doesn't make any sense to me, especially coming from Kyle Anderson, who's a bench player. You know, this is his third team in, I believe, 7 or 8 years. He played for the Spurs, the Grizzlies, and now he's playing for the T-Wolves. But he's not really a leadership role guy. I think that this would be a very different situation if this was coming from Karl Anthony Towns or Ant Edwards. But I mean, coming from Kyle Anderson, it just seems kind of ridiculous to me.
Yeah.
What's your thoughts on it?
I think you got a point there. I think, if it's a superstar, maybe they have a little bit more of a sway in things. They are the face of the team, the org, stuff like that. So coming from Anderson, however, I like Anderson. I think he's been a great role player, although he's had some mess ups towards the end of this year, especially against the Lakers. I didn't think he played well at all, turning the ball over. But that game was just an absolute grind for both teams. But I mean, here's what I'm thinking. I think that Gobert, regardless of what's going on behind the scenes, because we see this a lot. I mean, and you know what? This is weird. Like, why is somebody from like the Timberwolves releasing stuff like this? This happened with the Warriors too. Like, why are they releasing like the punch on Draymond Green? That just like hurts the org overall. And I remember Steve Kerr being really upset about that. But just hopping back into this, I mean, I think Gobert, is mostly at fault. I'm sure there's a lot of stuff that goes on behind the scenes. In fact, I remember hearing some stuff, when the Draymond punch was really coming out early on in the season. People were thinking, okay, their season's over, and it probably still has some problems going on. Maybe it still had an impact. They've kind of been okay overall, but, like, people were saying that this does happen a lot behind the scenes. Maybe not punches like that, but a lot of getting into it and stuff like that. But to throw a punch, during a game where everybody's there, everybody's seeing it, it's like Gobert's got a temperament issue, and you gotta not do that. I guess I can understand the suspension there, but I would say that you probably needed Gobert. I mean, I think you needed him in that game. And I think that he's not like the most impactful. He hasn't really been himself this year with the Timberwolves. But I do think that he could have came in, when Cat was really getting in foul trouble. Gobert could have come in. He could have been a great rim protector. He could have added some points there. Him and Conley have great synergy. I think they're probably winning that game. So I don't know. I think it's a little sus. I mean, like, I understand that you got to suspend him, maybe get him out there for doing something as outlandish as that. But if you want to stay in the playoffs, you got to maybe keep him in. I mean, you already are missing out on Jaden McDaniels, who punches a wall,
breaks his hand. And I agree with you, man. I think if Rudy Gobert is in that game, I think they beat the Lakers. I really do. Kyle Anderson, who was actually playing center, in light of Rudy Gobert, it was just getting smashed at the rim by Anthony Davis over and over, and he is just, he's exactly what he is. He's a role player, and he doesn't have the same credentials that Rudy does. Now, with that said, Rudy does need to stop being so sensitive. He really does. And if he's worried about being called the B word and stuff like that, it's pretty simple. Just toughen up and grind it out, man.
Doc, do you remember when he cried because he didn't make the All-Star game with the Utah Jazz?
I do.
And then I think what's funny about this situation too is when Draymond punches Jordan Poole, Gobert does this tweet, it says something like insecurity shows itself. Do you remember that? What did he say?
Insecurity is loud.
Yep. And, the same thing happens. Same season. Yep. And then I love Draymond's response, just repeating that tweet.
Yeah. I mean, Rudy has a lot that he has to work on. And I think the Timberwolves organization as a whole is going to have to make a decision this summer. Kyle Anderson is definitely right about that. With that said, I don't think that it would be the best course of action for them to try to trade Rudy Gobert, especially considering the massive haul they gave to the Utah Jazz for him. They're not going to get anything like that in return. Honestly, I would probably try to get rid of Kyle Anderson, run it back with a healthy Cat and Edwards, Mike Conley's there, and Rudy, and see where you can make some noise. Because, I mean, Cat hasn't played the entire season, and they still have been able to make it into the play-in tournament. So I think that if they have everyone firing on full cylinders, they should be able to sit comfortably somewhere between, I think, probably like five or six. I think I could see them making it there. But yeah, they have a lot of decisions to make, and they have a lot of locker room issues that have to get fixed. I think it's also worth noting that Anthony Edwards came out in an interview and said, this isn't all on Rudy Gobert, which he is the leader and face of that franchise right now. As they've kind of shifted away from Cat. So for him to be saying that means something. It means that there's a lot more going on, like what you're saying, behind the scenes that we don't have access to. But yeah, the NBA also has a problem with all of these leaks happening, because I remember when the Draymond Jordan Poole punch came out, the initial report was nothing compared to the video. The video was damning. It really was. He Superman punched him, and it looked like he almost knocked him out. It was crazy. And at the end of the day, only one of those guys got an extension. So,
well, Doc, let me ask you this:
stuff.
You were saying that maybe they'll try and dump Gobert, maybe Anderson. With Gobert and his gigantic contract, who's going to be wanting to pick that up, just given the season that he's had so far?
That's a great question. I think that there's really only one or two options. Obviously, when you're in the front office, you call every single team in the league. I think the best bet, though, would be trying to shift him to Atlanta.
Hmm.
So in that trade, you could straight up do John Collins, who is someone the Hawks have been trying to get rid of for like the past, 4 years.
Yep.
You can take John Collins, you can take Clint Capella and do a swap for Rudy. And I think the reason why that would benefit both sides is Quinn Snyder is now the coach of Atlanta, and he understands probably better than anyone how to actually utilize Rudy Gobert and his talents. He would be a great pick and roll partner with Trae Young and Javonte Murray. And then, you might have to flip a couple seconds or something like that as well, because Rudy's stock right now is not going to be very high. That would be the one team I would really try to zero in on in terms of trying to get a trade done if the Timberwolves really do want to move off of Rudy Gobert. The other team you could possibly try is Charlotte. They are just not getting traction or going anywhere. Even with LaMelo Ball, they got to figure something out. I mean, you could try to do a Gordon Hayward swap if you wanted to. That could be a 1-for-1 if you're lucky. But outside of those two teams, I don't really know what other options the Timberwolves would have. They're not going to get the same haul back. They're not going to get their draft capital back in any sense. So they're going to have to figure that out for sure.
You would definitely have to sweeten the pot somewhere. I mean, maybe you're going to have to pay for some of his contract, because he's got such a huge contract. But I actually really like the Atlanta trade destination for Gobert. I mean, I totally agree with you with Quinn Snyder, and I think Quinn Snyder and him probably have a good history as well. He probably would want to move over there. Maybe Quinn would really like him as well. Just maybe, and you know what? If you really think about it, probably most teams would want Gobert. You would just kind of have to sweeten the pot, like I was saying, just provide some sort of incentive to take him with that gigantic contract.
Yeah, definitely. You got to make the salaries work somehow. All right, so let's move on. What we're going to do today, too, is we have a couple more topics we want to talk about. And one of the more exciting ones is going to be the playoffs that are coming up and starting Saturday. We have this is going to be really exciting because this playoff race is unlike anything we've ever seen. Two quick fun facts, too. This is the first time in NBA history that all 4 of the California teams have made the playoffs, and the first time in NBA history that all 3 of the Texas teams have not. So just a couple fun facts for our listeners. But let's go ahead. Let's start with the East. Let's see how the East is looking, shall we?
Yeah, let's dive right on into it. I'm going to pull up a bracket here so we can get a better look.
Perfect. Look at that, people. That right there. I'm pointing there. There we go. Look at that, people. That's editing at its finest right there. All right, so our first round, it looks like we're going to have either Chicago or Miami versus Milwaukee. I'm just going to be 100% honest. I love Jimmy Butler. I love DeRozan and Zach LaVine. It's not going to matter. They're not beating the Bucks. I think both of those teams get swept in 4 or a gentleman's sweep in 5.
I couldn't agree more with you there. I think that I have Milwaukee as my favorite coming out of the East, and I think they're going to slam everybody they come into contact with. So,
yeah,
kind of quick right there for me.
Yeah, I think Giannis has proven that he is the best player in the world, even though right now he is not at the top of a lot of MVP ballots. That's a race between Nikola Jokic and our boy from Philly, Joel Embiid. But Giannis is Giannis, man. Brook Lopez is playing incredible. Like Drew Holiday, that entire team is just monstrous. And it's not going to matter who comes out of this play-out team or this play-in team. It could be Chicago or Miami. They're both going to get squashed.
I will say one thing about Milwaukee too, Doc, is that they've got chemistry. They've got a team that's, coming back. They're pretty healthy from what I understand. And the thing that I love about Giannis is that, maybe he's number 3, number 4 in the MVP race. But when it counts, I mean, the guy is a killer in the playoffs. He's an absolute animal. And like, if you were wanting to really choose somebody out of those three to take, on your team, I'm probably choosing Giannis between Embiid and Jokic. Might be a crazy
Oh,
take, but
yeah.
I mean, the guy's a monster.
I don't think it's a crazy take at all. Only one of them has won a championship,
Hmm.
you know, like, and Giannis, in my opinion, and I don't think this is a hot take at all. Giannis has been the best player in the world for a couple years now.
See, that's what I'm saying.
That's just how it is. Like, he's the man, he's always going to be the man. Like,
Hmm.
when you have teams literally trying to construct a wall of players to stop you from getting to the rim, that speaks volumes of how good you really are and how indomitously unstoppable you are as a player. And that's what teams have to throw at Giannis. And he knows that. The guy's a freak. All right, let's move on to what I think is going to be probably the most fun first round matchup in this entire playoff bracket. And that's going to be Cleveland and New York.
Yeah, I mean, I'm looking at these two. I think this is probably the most fun out of all of them. They are the 4th and the 5th seed, so you might assume as much. But I think New York has just kind of been on a tear these last 20 games. I mean, they're really doing well. They're really coordinating well. I think Jalen Brunson is he's been an absolute dog. In fact, I'm sure the Mavs are just kicking themselves for not keeping him, and they should have. And I think everybody agreed that they should have, and they let him go, and now he's dominating in New York, and the Mavs are having all sorts of issues. Anyway, enough about the Mavs. Let's talk about the Knicks. Emmanuel Quickly has been an absolute beast. A lot of people are saying that maybe he should be 6th man of the year. I totally agree with that.
Yeah.
I think he's very versatile in his scoring. And I think he's just like coming great off the bench. They're always plus when he's on the court. He's somebody I really like. Julius Randle obviously is having a great comeback year from a previous year where he wasn't playing as well. They have a really good core of young and veteran talent. They could go somewhere. But I do think I have Cleveland, and you probably will too.
I do. So ever since Donovan Mitchell has come to Cleveland, they went from losing out in the playoffs last year, in a very narrow play-in tournament, to being the 4th seed. He is the oldest player on that team in the starting lineup at 25 years old. And Donovan Mitchell has the maturity and leadership to lead a team, and the playoff experience too, to lead a young core at least past the first round. And I would say if they weren't facing Milwaukee, they'd probably make it farther. But I don't know if they can beat Milwaukee. I don't know if anyone can beat Milwaukee. But I think this is going to be Cleveland in 7. The reason I think it's going to be 7 is because Jalen Brunson was the kryptonite to Donovan Mitchell last year in the playoffs. And they've met a couple times this year. And the last game they played, New York beat Cleveland, actually. And Jalen Brunson, I think, went off for 38 or 40. He plays with this confidence level against Donovan Mitchell. So Donovan's going to have to figure that out. But overall, talent-wise, I think that Cleveland is far superior. And this is going to be a real barn burner, and I can't wait. But I'm still going Cleveland in 7 for sure. All right, let's move on to Philly and Brooklyn. What's your take on this?
I think these last two, Philly, Brooklyn, Boston, Atlanta, we might be able to cover a little bit quicker. I think Brooklyn, after the trades, they still look pretty solid. I think they're more in a rebuild, leaving their stars, Kevin Durant, who am I spacing on? Kyrie Irving. But I think they got a ton of great pieces, I think I like a lot of the talent that they bring, and I think they're really solid for the future. They got a lot of picks, and they've got Spencer Dinwiddie, who's one of the greatest isolation players in the league right now, and you can't forget about Mikal Bridges. That guy, since leaving the Suns, has just really turned it on. People are even saying, oh, go ahead.
Oh, sorry. I didn't mean to cut you off. He's averaging 26 points per game since coming over to Brooklyn.
See, and this is why I like him. I think, he almost has like that Lowry Markkanen thing, that feel, the
Hmm.
trade where maybe he was getting underutilized in Chicago and with the Cavs, and then he comes in, they make him one of the primary ball players with Utah, and he just has this breakout season. With Mikal Bridges, you could always sense the talent there, and now he's kind of turning into a little Kevin Durant. He's got, such great touch. He's an absolute
Hmm.
monster, and I think he's going to be their number one player, for the next years to come. However, I think Phil is just, I think they're just the more solid team. They have Embiid, who I think is going to be the MVP, and I think they're going to pull away with it.
I do too. Philadelphia. So here's an interesting thing a fun fact, at least in my opinion. It's not really a fact; it's an opinion. Joel Embiid right now is the best player in the NBA to not reach his conference finals. You know, like
I think
he
that
is
says
the
a lot.
guy. It does, and I think that he's also aware of that. And one of the reasons he wants MVP so badly and has really been pouring it out on the court is because he wants to go down as one of the greatest of all time. This MVP award is very important to him. I think he deserves it as well. He's been runner up the past couple years to Nikola. But I think that I just can't see Brooklyn beating Embiid or taking down Harden. Harden right now, too, has become kind of like the perfect running mate with Joel. They've found a way to really mesh. They're putting it together. PJ Tucker is playing fantastic for them. George Niang is a great shooter who is often underrated. And as good as Mikal Bridges is on both sides of the ball, I don't think that they can get past Philadelphia. I think Philly beats them in 6.
All
All
right.
right.
Let's move on to that final one, Boston and Atlanta. For me, I think this is going to be a little bit more fun than people really take it. I think Boston,
Mm-hmm.
people are assuming might go 4-0, 5-1. I do think Atlanta, with Quinn Snyder, they're playing different than they've normally played, which I think
Yes.
might add a little bit of spice. What do you think, Doc?
Yeah, I would agree. So Quinn's coaching was on full display in the play-in game versus Miami. A lot of ball movement, a lot of offensive rebounds. They completely neutralized Bam Adebayo. He couldn't get an offensive rebound to save his life in that game. And they had 4 different bench players in double digits, all because Quinn Snyder's the kind of coach who gets to know his players, their strengths, their weaknesses, and he gels them into a really good team. And the only time the Heat led in that game, and honestly, I thought the Heat were going to smash Atlanta because they had won 10 of the past 11 games that they had played, including the previous postseason. And I was like, there's absolutely no way that Miami is going to lose this game. They're going to run over them. The only time that Miami led that game was when they were up 2-4. That was it. The Hawks led the rest of the game and won very comfortably in a game where Trae Young shot 1 of 8 from 3. So I think that they do have a chance to probably sucker punch Boston a little bit. However, I still think Boston is going to find a way to just throw it down, and Atlanta is eventually going to have to start to gel and rebuild that team as well. Under Quinn Snyder, Quinn's a great coach. He'll figure it out for them, and they'll be contenders hopefully at some point in time. That'd be great to see. But I got Boston in 6, man. I think Atlanta can win a couple games. I absolutely do. I don't think they're going to win the series. All right, let's move on to the West. Kind of cut and dry on this one too. I think OKC is going to beat Minnesota, but it doesn't matter. Neither of those teams are going to beat Denver. Denver has been the quiet dark horse of the West for that no one's talking about. that I find so interesting. Whenever people, analysts, national analysts, are talking about who's going to come out of the West, it's always, oh, it might be the Warriors, it could be Phoenix, it might be the Lakers. No one's talking about Memphis or Denver at all. I think Denver's going to just start rolling over everybody, man. I think that they have, they got Jamal Murray back. He's looking fantastic again. Thank God, because I was really worried when he tore his MCL. What was that, 13 months ago, his last season. And he was just out. And I was like, oh, man, I hope he comes back and he can still be the same player. But and Jokic has showed time and time again that he can will his team to the playoffs by himself. So with the right pieces around him, it's not going to matter. OKC, Minnesota, they're not going to get past Denver. Denver's going to win this in 4.
Win it in 4? Wow. Okay.
Oh, yeah.
I think I also am taking OKC over Minnesota. I just think Minnesota's in a lot of turmoil right now. Got a lot of players that are out, and I think that there's a lot of drama going on. I'm not even sure if Gobert's going to play in this next game, but we'll see, and we'll have to see how they kind of gel with the rest of the team there. I think I have Denver going in 5 or maybe 6. I'll put 4 there for you. I think Denver, you have Denver as one of maybe the favorites coming out of the West. I just think that these guys, like Phoenix, and this is maybe a hot take. I know Golden State hasn't looked the best. A lot of people say that they could be playoff ready. I mean, I think they're going to be playoff ready. I'll talk about them a little bit later. I think there's some other guys that might be favorites coming in.
Awesome. All right. Let's cover Phoenix and the Clippers. So this one is going to be an interesting battle because I don't know if the reports say that Paul George is going to be able to come back for the postseason. But as a Utah Jazz fan, and as Utah Jazz fans, we remember Mike Conley and Donovan Mitchell 2 years ago rolling their ankles, and they had 2 weeks to recover, and they both were not the same. So I don't think that Kawhi Leonard is transcendent enough to get past Chris Paul, Devin Booker, Kevin Durant, and what's their center's name? I'm blanking on it.
The guy's a stud.
Yeah, Deontay Ayton, right? Ayton. Yep. And you know what I really like about Ayton is you don't have to run plays for this guy, and he still gets 17 and 10 a night. He still finds ways to do that. That's probably my favorite thing about him. I think he could be a little more aggressive at the rim, but everyone has their flaws. But this guy doesn't have really any plays run for him at all, and he still puts up numbers. I just don't think that the Clippers have the firepower or the depth to get past that Phoenix team. There's no way. No way. It's not even a competition without PG-13 in there.
I can agree with you more there. Here's the thing. With Phoenix, since they've acquired Kevin Durant, and when Kevin Durant's healthy, they're unstoppable. In fact,
they're killers, man.
I read a stat where when Kevin Durant has been healthy this year, he's been 19-1 in the past 20 games. And so I think that is going to be the key to them in the playoffs. I've heard a lot of stuff about Phoenix. I think a lot of people have been saying, okay, well, they're going to be favorites coming out of the West. I've heard others saying, okay, there's no way. I mean, Kevin Durant's coming into a new program. They're going to need time to gel. They just lost some core players, that they had to ship over to the Nets. But here's what I'm saying. I think Kevin Durant can come into any system and destroy instantly. He's just that type of player. He doesn't necessarily need to be like a ball hog or a primary ball handler. He can just find his buckets whenever. He can just be a spot-up shooter. He can drive the lane. He can cut to the basket. He can do it all. When he's healthy, he's just probably the most dominant player in the NBA and can fit anywhere. So I have them as one of my favorites coming out of the West. And I think that they're going to probably dominate the Lakers, not the Lakers, rather the Clippers, in either a 4-1 or a 4-0 sweep.
Yeah, let's go 4-0 with that. I don't think the Clippers have a prayer, man. Not against that team. All right, so I think this one is going to be the one where we differ, my man. Because I don't think that Golden State can get past the Kings. I don't. I think that this is the Kings' time. And I mean, like, let's be real. They haven't lost a playoff game since 2006, you know?
Yeah, let me dig into this. I think the Golden State Warriors are going to beat the Kings. And here's why. I think that there is a legitimate difference between the postseason and the regular season. You see that,
There is.
there are players that get locked down more. There are coaches that are really analyzing each game. This is a 7-game series, it's not just a one and done. So they're going to be really looking at each player, each weakness, and how they can win. The Golden State Warriors have done this so many times, and I'm not even a huge Golden State Warrior fan. I just know what they're capable of. And when people say you can't just turn it on in the playoffs, I think you can. Not only that, Andrew Wiggins is coming back. And I know that Andrew Wiggins, maybe he receives a little bit of flack, but the guy was an all-star starter when they won the championship. The guy is legit, and he was their number 2 option when they won. And now you got Clay, who's playing well. You got Steph Curry. He might not be the old Steph Curry that's just MVP level, but he's still insanely good. They still have great synergy. And so I think I have them beating the Kings, who are still a little inexperienced. They haven't been to the playoffs in a very, very long time. And so this is going to be
since 2006. You missed my joke.
Time.
I said they haven't lost. But no, let's put Golden State on there. However, I do disagree with you. I think the number 1 offense in NBA history is going to find a way to pull it out. What do you think the Warriors are going to win in, though?
I have Warriors in either 6 or 7.
Okay. See, I have Sacramento in 7 because it's going to take there's going to take them 7 games for sure. All right, so we might differ on this one too, because after watching that piss poor performance from LeBron James, the Lakers and Anthony Davis barely get by the T-Wolves, there's no way they stand a chance against Memphis, man. Even with Steven Adams and Brandon Clark being out, Memphis is going to roll them over in 6, in my opinion. I don't think LeBron James has the stamina to keep up with these young guns, the way they're moving and grooving, and that's not his fault. The man's 38 years old and has played 20 years in the league, and he's still at the pinnacle. He's going to be all NBA again in his 20th year. That's crazy. It's crazy. I'm not trying to take anything away from the King. I just think that Father Time is undefeated, and it's always going to be that way. I don't think that the Lakers can pull this one out.
Well, I'm saying Father Time is getting defeated by LeBron right now. He's showing up some of his best stats in, what is it, his 21st or is his 20th year?
20th year.
20th year in the league, and he's showing his best stats. He's shooting like 29 points per game. He's just an absolute dog, and he's just he still looks like extremely dominant. And I've heard that teams are just as afraid of him as he is now than when he was, 5-10 years ago.
Yeah, I mean, you can't sleep on them. I'm not saying sleep on the Lakers.
Right.
You got to take them seriously, especially if you're Memphis. You have to have your game plan ready. I just think that the superior athleticism and youth is going to favor Memphis in this one, and they're just going to run them up and down the court.
See, I value veterans over youth. I think they can run them up and down the court, but I think there's a huge thing about, these champions is that they're really not in their early 20s. You don't really have a stacked team of 23-year-olds winning championships. You tend to have them, 27, 28 or a little bit older with a blend of veterans and things like that. You need people in their absolute pinnacles. And although, LeBron is really up there in the age, I just think that he's such a veteran. He's been here so many times in his career. And although I don't think that the Lakers had a very good showing against the Timberwolves, in fact, I'd say that it was terrible.
It was awful.
I think that it was terrible not because of LeBron. I think it was terrible because of D'Angelo Russell, who only scored 2 points, who's supposed to be one of the primary players on the team. I don't think Austin Reeves, who's really been a great player for them this year, I don't think he played very well. I think it was all on LeBron's shoulders and AD
Vando didn't look good either. Vando
Vando,
looked
Vando
terrible.
comes and goes. I think Vando's a really good defender, but I don't see him really making a huge impact in the playoffs. So you could be right about that. But I still have the Lakers taking it. I think that, if Anthony Davis can really heal up, I know these past few games he hasn't been scoring more than 20 points a game and he hasn't been as dominant. But if he's really, healed up when this game starts, I think that they're gonna just roll over the Memphis Grizzlies. But how
No
do you have
way.
Memphis winning? I could see it, in maybe 5 or 6, maybe 6.
I would be shocked if, like, absolutely, and maybe I'm gonna come back and eat my words. Who knows? I think Memphis beats them in 7. I don't think that they're gonna be able to. I do think
series.
it is. It's gonna be a fun series, and I kind of get the vibes that it's gonna be like the Nets and the Celtics. Was it last year where the Celtics beat them in 4, but it was like the closest 4-game series you could ever see.
Mm-hmm.
I think that's how all 7 games are going to be, because LeBron is LeBron, man. He's going to find a way to win.
Yep,
games.
that's what I'm saying.
He will. I just think that Memphis is going to move past it. All right, so that is our first round predictions, everybody. The last thing we're going to discuss is a fun little segment where we're actually going to dive back into the lottery for the 2023 NBA draft, and we're going to be talking about who we would want the least. So this was kind of difficult, in my opinion, to kind of figure out, because we're looking at all these guys in a very talent-rich draft where there's a lot of prospects who could absolutely become MVPs and superstars. I mean, like we talked about on our last episode, I think this is the 84 draft all over again. You know what I mean? So it was kind of a task to look at these guys and think, all right, well, out of the top 14, who are we going to want the least? So we were able to nail down a small little list of guys. JD, do you want to go first, and then we can alternate?
Sure.
All right, sounds good.
So we had maybe 5 players that we thought could potentially be in the top 10 or in the lottery. And Doc, that each year there are people that have a ton of potential, but they end up maybe being duds. And we're trying to dissect that. We're trying to see who could be the duds of this year's draft. And for my first guy, and this is probably, I think this guy could have a lot of potential. He's not like my least wanted guy, but I like him. I think that some people are kind of harsh on him too, but I have Grady Dick.
Hold on, let me stop you right there before you start. So everyone knows we are starting from 5 and going down to 1. 1 is going to be the guy we want the least out of the entire group. So please start with Grady.
So this is my most 5. Of the least, being Grady Dick. Now Grady Dick, he's probably going maybe 9 through 12 in a lot of these drafts. I think he'll probably land there. I think his upside, he's probably the best shooter in the draft. His downside, I don't think he can really create his own shots. If you take a look at it, I think in the year he only had 2 isolation shots the entire year of college basketball. For somebody who's potentially going in the top 10, you'd maybe expect somebody to be able to create his own shots, and he can't really. I mean, he's an incredible shooter. He's a great spot-up shooter. He does cut to the basket. He can do a lot of things, but he's not a primary ball handler, which a lot of people say, okay, maybe this guy doesn't have the highest ceiling as the others do. Maybe he does. I mean, I can see him potentially turning into a Kevin Huerter, who's Kevin. I love Kevin Huerter. I'd love to have him on the Utah Jazz. I'm a Jazz fan.
Oh my gosh.
Maybe even a ceiling like Gordon
like
Hayward.
A Bojan Bogdanovic too.
Bojan, perhaps, The thing with Grady Dick is I haven't seen him do any post moves. I haven't seen him really open up, other types of plays, creativity when he's driving or doing anything like that mid-range. He's more of just like a spot-up shooter. And that's why
he's very
that's why I probably want him as my maybe number 5. I do like him. I think that he's a safe pick, though. I think he could, he's going to make an immediate impact on any team he's on. He'll probably be a pretty good player. But that is something of concern, looking at those isolation shots and things like that.
Yeah, and that's what makes this exercise so much fun. Is like these guys are the guys we would want the least, and they're still all really good players. And I agree. I think Grady Dick is very one-dimensional. I think he's an NBA ready talent. I just don't think his impact is going to be overwhelming. So let's move on to number 4. Number 4, I have Jerice Walker. So here's the thing. It's yeah, we do have. So here's the thing. Jerice is probably one of the best defenders coming out of college ball, you know. But he has shown an inability to truly be like a good offensive threat. And I think that that's going to be needed, or else he could just turn out to be like a Jared Vanderbilt, which is still a good player to have on your team. But I mean, like there's not a lot of consistency or upside for a guy who can't pass the ball and create shots and shoot the ball. You know, you have to be able to shoot. That's what the whole game is based off of. So I think Jerry's, if I'm saying that correctly, is a great defender. But I think there's so many guys that are just better than him that if it was, you know, him, Nick Smith Jr., and Anthony Black on the table, I'd be looking at those two guards before I'd be looking at Jerice Walker. I'd also be looking at Hendricks before I was looking at Walker personally.
I think Taylor Hendricks is shooting like 50, 40, 80. And I think that, yeah, it's crazy. He is a little bit, you know, of a thinner frame than Jerice Walker, who looks like a linebacker. But it's definitely something to consider. I think Jerice, you like what he can do. I think that he came into a Houston team and, you know, there's a lot of older guys, a lot of veterans there, and he really fit in well. So, I mean, he can be good. You can see he's got potential. However, I mean, he was shooting like around 40% from the three. However, his free throw wasn't the best, and I think that's a good indicator of, you know, how they may be shooting. We could be totally wrong about him. However, I have Jerice Walker too, that I'm not really a big fan of. Maybe not having the hugest upside. I don't see him being a Julius Randle like people are saying.
No, I don't think so either.
Okay. For my number 3, we both have seen this guy in a lot of mock drafts. He has a lot of variance. You know, you can see him as high as number 8, number 9. You can see him even at the end of the first round. I've seen him as high or as low as 28. Our guy is G.G. Jackson. Now, there's a lot to be said about G.G. Jackson. He was the earliest or the youngest player in college. You know, he just was turning 18 or something, so still a 17-year-old coming in. So very young, maybe still a bit inexperienced. And when you look at his tape, he looks absolutely stellar. You know, you can see, wow, this guy could have potential to be a superstar. You know, he's definitely going to be a project, though. There are some areas of concern. He didn't shoot well. He was given the task of being kind of the primary ball handler for his team, and he didn't really perform the best. And granted, he was younger, you know, kind of growing into that, and you could definitely see flashes of greatness from him. But I wasn't really sold on his play. Also, I noticed that there was some attitude problems, which, you know, might happen with a lot of younger guys. However, this is a guy, you know, who was upset with his coach because he said he wasn't being played right. And I think that could pose an issue in the NBA as they move up.
Yeah, he's a project for sure, and not someone that he would, like we said, he would be one of the guys I would least want to take on, especially if you're a team trying to move up your championship window. You don't want any more projects. You know, you want to have guys who are going to know their role, develop, and you know, lock it down for you. So let's run two at once. The last two we both had was Jordan Hawkins and then Cam Whitmore. Honestly, like, Jordan Hawkins is not a guy I would take in the top 10. I think he's a good established player. I like him a lot. He's a guy I would take probably 14 through 16. He reminds me a lot of Ochai Agbaji, who plays for the Utah Jazz. That that we got from Cleveland in the Donovan Mitchell trade, and Ochai went at 14. I just wouldn't take Jordan Hawkins at 10. I saw one mock draft where he was number 10, and I think that in a talent-rich draft like this one, you can't be taking that guy at 10. No way.
Mm-hmm. For me, Cam Whitmore was my least guy, the least wanted in the draft. And here's the thing, I think Cam Whitmore could have a lot of upside. He could be good. I'm just not taking him in the top 10. I don't think he really showed anything in college. I did hear that he was injured, coming off maybe a broken finger, which could definitely be affecting his shooting, which his shooting was not the best. However, I think if you're taking somebody in the top 10, you want to at least see, a little bit of that upside. And he did show really some flashes of athleticism. However, I'm not big on Cam Whitmore. I think that he could be a potential dud. I would be taking him a little bit later in the lottery, maybe even like 15 or 16. I'm not sure. He reminds me of Kuminga, who came out of the draft a few years back, who really hasn't panned out.
Yeah, Kuminga was picked up at 7, I believe, which is around where Cam Whitmore is sitting. And Jonathan Kuminga really has not. And a part of that, too, could also be the fact that Golden State just is not a good place to develop young talent. I mean, that's per Steve Kerr. He said that in an interview. So don't take my word for it. But I don't think Cam Whitmore is going to be that fantastic either. And like we both said, we could be absolutely wrong about this. It's just a fun exercise we're running, for the fans, listeners to the show. Please tell us what you guys think in the comments. Guys, we're going to wrap that up. That's episode 2. Thank you for listening. We're going to be jumping on again real soon so we can continue to cover more of our NBA talk. Guys, thanks for listening. We'll see you next time.